Good morning, everyone. Welcome, dear colleagues and partners, for another session of the Erasmus Goes Digital series. Today, we will have two sessions. This one in the morning is for users of the Erasmus Dashboard, and in the afternoon, we will have a quite similar session, but directed at users with an in-house system or third-party software. So first of all, as you might have seen in the chat, if you have any questions, you can post them in the Q&A. And we ask that in the case of similar questions, you vote on the question that's already there, so that because the questions with the most votes, they get on top, and then we can see which one we need to address with the different speakers. We have a very full agenda, but I want to say some quick words about the overall themes of today's session. On the one hand, I think we want to present and draw attention to all the work that's being done by partners on a day-to-day basis to manage the dashboard. But on the other hand, we also want to acknowledge that we're not oblivious to everything that's not going as planned and that needs to be addressed. So we will talk about the adjustments and additional actions that we will be taking. I will start by introducing the first speaker, which today is Alexandra Licht. And if you hadn't had the pleasure of meeting her, she's a policy officer at the European Commission, DG Education and Culture. And she will present or provide an update on the state of play of the European Student Card Initiative. Good morning, Alexandra.
Yes, good morning. Just let me one moment.
Yes, no problem. I hope that everybody can hear me well, and Alexandra as well. If not, please notify us.
Yes, just a second. Sorry for this. Just a moment. Sorry, give me a second. There was
no problem. So we will have
change in my settings.
No problem. Take your time. So we will have a total of 5 speakers. We will take some time in between after certain speakers for a Q&A. But as we said, you can always post your questions in the Q&A, and we will take the appropriate time to address them. Yes, I can see your screen now.
Okay, I hope you can see me. I hope you can hear me well. Excellent,
Perfectly.
Great. So first of all, thank you everyone for being here. We're very happy to have you on board, and we will have exciting updates today. I would like to just to give a bit of an update, a bit of an overview of where we stand now. As you all know, there are a lot of efforts put in place from the side of the support to all institutions in order to mainstream our work, and for that a lot of updates have been done on various fronts. For example, as you have noticed, the service desk is there and operational and is ready to serve you and provide support for all of you. Also, we have the governance structures being put in place together with various enhancements to the dashboard and other activities that are being made as we speak in order to support the implementation and the connection to EWP. Now, you would also learn today, my colleagues from EWP Plus will share that there is a lot of effort on interoperability as much as we can in this endeavor, in this effort to exchange IAs and LAs as soon as possible. As you also know, from next year, the digitalization will be part of the monitoring of ECHE. This is why we also put all this effort in order to ensure that there will be all the possibilities for you to connect and successfully exchange IAs and LAs. And we further encourage you to continue and put all the efforts you can Please turn to the help desk in case you have any problems. Please as well, don't hesitate to raise any concerns to your digital officers and continue and do all the excellent work you already do. So thanks a lot. I see that there might be some problems in connection. I hope you could all hear me well and see me well. And I wish good luck to all the presenters today. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. We could hear you perfectly, but your camera fell off at the end, but the message was loud and clear, so thank you for that. With that, I will introduce our first speaker, which is Nikos. He is the Erasmus Plus officer at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, and he will, well, reintroduce us to some of the key principles of the dashboard. By looking back at the original purpose of the dashboards and the adaptations that were made along the way, also presenting some key principles for using the dashboard. Welcome, Nikos, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, David, and welcome to all of you attending this today's session webinar about the dashboard. So as David said, I'm going to have a back to basics presentation for the dashboard users that are attending this session. So please allow me to share my screen and show you my presentation. So this is, I would say, a reintroduction to these key principles of using the dashboard. So many of you probably are already using it and some are not. So some context, I think that it's a very well a good introduction for this one. So as you probably all know, the original scope of the dashboard was the management of online learning agreements. And of course, when we talk about management, it's not the negotiations of the content of the online learning agreements, but it's more about filling in and signing. So negotiations remain at the bilateral level via emails and other ways of communication. Of course, this original and initial functionality has been enriched during the years with the Interinstitutional Agreement Manager, IIM, as you already probably know, the Erasmus Plus app module, applications for Erasmus Plus, and many other functionalities that will also enrich the dashboard. So as you understand, based on this context, based on these design decisions about the dashboard, the primary target group of using this web tool was small and medium-sized universities. And based on this, you expect that the consequence was that there are certain capacity and functionality limitations to this web platform. Of course, we then, in 2021, we had the European Student Card Initiative Roadmap. And so the dashboard was promoted and was proposed as an alternative entry point. Yes.
Just one thing, your presentation is not on presenter mode at the moment, so we can see your full screen.
You see? Okay, let me try once again. So is it right now?
We can still see like the standard view with the slides on the left and the one slide in the center.
Okay, so let me change it. Let me try something else and share this one. Is it not good?
Yes, we can see it now. Thank you.
Okay, so going back, unfortunately, sorry for that. So, as I was saying before, the dashboard was promoted, was suggested, proposed as an alternative entry point for free web services for all higher education institutions in order to meet the deadlines and to facilitate the implementation of the roadmap. So the target group remained small and medium-sized higher education institutions. Of course, I could say that for the latter, it was most of a last resort solution in the progress of connecting to the WP network. So at this point, I would like to ask you, all participants, to participate in a very quick poll. It has two questions. It's about the size of the university that you represent here today and about when you entered using EWP and especially the dashboard. So I'm going just to share the poll right now and launch it. And so please do provide your answers to this. I will just give you, I hope you see it. David, if it's not the case, please do let me know.
I can see it.
Yes, I'm not sure if it's shared with all colleagues here, but I see numbers raising. Thank you very much. Thank you all for participating in this poll, and it's very, very interesting, the outcomes. Let's wait for a few more seconds. So this poll is important because I think that it's very important to know the size of the universities in order also for the consortium to make informed decisions about the actual users and about the needs, because the larger the university, the bigger the university in terms of enrolled students. Of course, there are different needs, there are different issues that need to be addressed. So I think I have 70% participating. If we go to 80, just a few more answers, please. I think that we can end this poll. No, I do not see raising the percentage. So, okay, let's end this poll. Thank all 300 participants in this one. So the results are just sharing. I hope you see it. David, can you confirm that?
Yes, we can still see it. Because...
So I see that 43% is medium-sized universities. So they have these special needs. And of course, the remaining, let's say around 47, 45%, it's about very small and small universities. So it's very nice to know this one. So we have a very small number of large or very large universities participating. And this will help, and this will inform the presentation in its progress. And also here I see that results are a little bit shared about how long you have been using the dashboard. So I see that it's around 30% new users, very newcomers, and also users with some experience, of course, less than a year, and more colleagues having more than a year of experience. And so, of course, they have more feedback to share with us. So based on this, I would like to share with you the perspective of a very large university like Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. So let me give you some the profile of the university. So we are talking about very highly centralized Erasmus Plus mobilities management. So we have one central Erasmus office dealing with all the interinstitutional agreements, around 1,600 agreements, and of course student and staff mobilities. I would refer only to student mobilities, that's around 1,000 mobilities incoming and outgoing per year. Of course, as a very large university, we belong to the very large universities category. We have developed an in-house mobility management software. So we are connected regarding IIAs with the dashboard, with the AWP network, and we are working on using also the we are using the dashboard for the online learning agreements, but we are in the transition phase for using also our own software for that as well. So our experience adopting the Erasmus dashboard. The first phase, when a university starts using the dashboard, is of course reading the documentation. And of course, it's very good that we already have the knowledge base, the European Student Card Initiative knowledge base. You can see the link in the presentation, where you can see all the documentation, and you should go through it section by section in order to see what's the functionalities of the dashboard. Of course, the next step, and what we did also this one, was to have a very deep needs analysis and the feasibility study. So there is the dashboard. We are going to use it for the learning agreements. So does this cover our needs? And is it feasible based on the structure and the business process of our university to do it? And of course, the next phase was and is for all of us out there to review internal processes. So we need to see how we are going also to change probably the internal processes that we already have in order to be able to use this tool in the absence of any other solution for managing online learning agreements and IIAs. This is the two core functionalities, I could say, of the dashboard. So the second phase of this adoption was adjusting internal processes, of course, where this was needed. So in some case, it would be to decentralize online learning agreements. This was the case for the Aristotle University. So we've had a very highly centralized management of online learning agreements. In the institutional Erasmus Plus institutional coordinator had to sign each one of them in order to confirm that they are properly filled in and signed. But now the process has changed, and now departmental coordinators have the responsibility of properly filling in and signing the online learning agreements. And the Erasmus office comes as a validator of that through the dashboard. Or the other case would be to centralize IIAs. I think this is probably the case also for your universities using the interinstitutional agreements manager. So you probably had a very decentralized structure so far, but once you use the dashboard, you probably need to centralize it. And I can confirm that this is the case also for many universities that we cooperate. So adjusting internal processes, and of course, then the next step would be to set up roles. So to set up roles based on the needs and on the processes that we already have in our universities. And this is a screenshot of what we have done in our university. So we have 3 different roles. We have ECTS coordinator, which is the departmental coordinator. And then we have the institutional coordinator and the Erasmus officer. And they have different permissions. You do not have to give the same permissions to all people that have an account within your university profile. So the next thing is also to set up the accounts. So who are the people, who are the staff members of the university that will have access and will be assigned these roles? So the Erasmus officer will be a very small group of 10, 15 people in our case that are dealing with the online learning agreements, managing online learning agreements. Institutional coordinator is of course 1 or 2 people. And then is the ECTS coordinators, departmental coordinators that are faculty members from 41 schools in our case that will have to go in the dashboard and check and sign online learning agreements, or probably if you want to give them also this permission to draft and fill in probably IIAs as well. This is up to you, of course, to decide. So the third phase and the final phase is the training, which is very, very important. So once you have read the documentation, once you have reviewed your internal processes and you have come up with a plan, a long-term plan, then you need to train all involved staff members. So there is a train the trainer toolkit in the knowledge base as well. This is a screenshot also with very useful video topics and video tutorials that you can use. And of course, then there are webinars that you can organize. There are video tutorials that you can set up that would be probably more higher education specific for your needs, that will have more information in them. So going to the practical tips section, for example, I could share our own experience in the specific example of creating online learning agreements. So once we decided to use the dashboard for online learning agreements only, we were going through the process of creating them, the online learning agreements. So how we are going to use it? We are going to use the CSV file, the upload functionality that there is there, or we are going to ask our students to create their own online learning agreement. We have tried both, I could say. So the first year the first semester, we tried the upload. It was challenging because, as I mentioned, we are a very big university. So we had around 400 students uploading their details, which is very, very challenging. So since we saw that we realized that this is not so efficient, we opted for the second option, the second solution, which is we asked for our students to create their online learning agreement. So based on that, we had to go to the next step, was to create a higher education specific tutorial for our students that is being now published in our website. And so we give them a step-by-step guidance how to create and to fill in and to sign online learning agreement including all the specific information for our higher education institution, like responsible persons, which is a very, very challenging issue as well. So in order to sum up, I could say that the first thing that you need to do is, first of all, to assign this task, the management of the dashboard, to a certain colleague that can have an overview of the documentation. You have to go through this documentation and have an internal discussion about this documentation in order to identify the needs and how the dashboard can help you address these needs. Also, you need to decide on the roles that you are going to set up in the dashboard based on your needs. And of course, you should take into account the limitations of the platform. Unfortunately, we wish that it was a platform that could be used and could be customized based on the needs of each higher education institution, but this is not the case. There are certain limitations, like each software, and so you need to take this into account. You should also test it internally. Set up accounts, test it with staff members that you can communicate and discuss and see the whole workflow of setting up accounts, and probably also going through an online learning agreement and filling in it and signing it. So a trial and error approach is the best, I think, approach. And I think that we should be also creative in terms of training. There are many useful resources, but if you want to do something more, to set up something, please do. I think that it's very, very helpful, because your staff members and your students will identify themselves. They will see that you have tried to help them also internally adopt the dashboard. So this is it from me. I hope that it was helpful. And of course, I'm going to pass the floor back to David for the next presentation. I hope I was not too long.
No, we are perfectly on time, Nikos. Thank you. Yeah, I also find it interesting to see that the onboarding of the webinar is a pretty continuous process, given the number of people that are using it at the moment. For the people who are posting questions in the Q&A, at the moment I cannot see myself. I don't know. Yeah, okay, I'm still here. There are some questions that will be answered by the presentation of the next presenters, and the other ones we will address at the end in the Q&A section. So, like Alexandra mentioned in the beginning, since a few weeks, we have the newly established ESCI service desk. I think for about 10 weeks now, we have many people working magic and responding to all the tickets. And one of them is Michalis. He is part of the team at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki and also a service desk agent. And he will provide an overview of some of the main tickets that they've been processing over the past weeks and some of the questions coming in, etc. Michalis, welcome. I can see that you're starting to share your screen, and I can see your presentation.
Okay. Can you hear me right now?
Yes, I can hear and see you. Welcome.
Okay, thank you very much, David, for the introduction. My name is Michalis Zannetos, and together with Victoria Penopoulou and Gabriela Gapsi, we are the members of the Erasmus Student Card Initiative Service Desk. Today, we will present some notable statistics regarding the operation of the ESCI Service Desk, along with some useful information, including FAQs and issues that have been reported by the international relation officers. So the newly established service desk started its operation on the 1st of April. Our aim is to provide support and resolve issues related to the dashboard application, the OLA application, the Erasmus Plus app, the WP network, authorization and authentication issues in general. All of these applications and services are supported by the ESCI service desk, which can be accessed on at support.erasmuswithoutpaper.eu. So from the beginning of operation, 730 issues submitted either by students or IROs have been resolved. 242 issues are at the time of the screenshot in progress and remained in pending status. As a help desk department, we aim to address any incoming issue by offering an initial response within 3 work days of its submission. Additionally, we set out to resolve the issues within 6 work days. Our success rate on these directives is 99.1% and 91.1% respectively. It is important to note that any issue that requires new implementations is considered labor-intensive and therefore is treated accordingly. For these cases, we allow larger resolution periods. The performance of the service desk is rated by IROs and students. Each time an issue is resolved, the reporters are offered the chance to rate their experience of the support they received by the ESCI service desk. The average satisfaction rate, according to reporter reviews so far, is 4.1 out of 5. IROs and students may also place a comment if they desire. Both rating and comments contribute to the improvement of the ESCI service desk. So now, looking at the issues by service, we notice that the vast majority of student issues, like 93%, are related to the application for ORLAs through the relevant web interface, learning-agreement.eu. This is normal since the ESCI service desk supports students mainly for the use of OLA applications. For a similar reason, we notice that the great majority of issues submitted by IROs are related to the dashboard, 81% of them, followed by the EWP network issues, 10%. The dashboard-related issues have been categorized according to the provided functionalities, where we notice that most of them, 41%, are concerning the interinstitutional agreements. The learning agreements in dashboard follow with 14%. So in the next slides, we're going to provide you with some FAQs. We frequently receive questions regarding the change of an institution's information, such as name, address, Erasmus code, or SAC code. It is important to mention that the dashboard acquires an institution's details directly from a primary resource. Therefore, changing those records can only be performed by notifying the responsible parties. Institutions' information changes are managed by our partners. You only need to submit a request at the service desk, and we will guide you through depending on the matter. A very common question is how can we change the email address of the main account holder, and subsequently whether the institution will lose information stored in dashboard after this change. You don't have to worry about that. The main account holder can be changed without any loss of data, since the information is stored at the institution's profile and not in the account itself. We remind you that the main account holder has an automatic access to all the available functions except for signing the OLAs. This permission can only be granted to the staff accounts. We strongly recommend using a non-personal generic email account, such as Erasmus at your institution's domain, which will speed up the email validation process as well. Now we will see 3 frequent issues that most of the time can be easily resolved by changing the appropriate setting inside the dashboard. Issue number 1. Partner IROs try to initiate an IIA with your institution, but your Erasmus code is not included in the list of partner institutions. Issue number 2. Problems relating to default IIA. Questions like, I'm editing the static info of my institution, but changes are not saved. Or, my default institution's data is not displayed in partner side. Issue number 3. Students are trying to initiate an online learning agreement with your institution, but they are presented with an error message notifying them that your institution is not ready to exchange OLAs via the EWP network. All of the above issues can be easily resolved by selecting the appropriate option in the EWP settings found in the left pane of the dashboard. The first option enables the handling of IIAs by the dashboard in the EWP network. If your default institution's data does not appear inside IIAs, make sure to select yes to the second option. Finally, the third option enables the handling of OLAs of your institution in the EWP network by the Erasmus Dashboard. How can I gain access in dashboard? Another question frequently. We are not in position to manage staff accounts and act on behalf of institutions. So in case you want to gain access in dashboard as a staff account, you should contact your main institutional account holder asking for your email to be added. Once the account holder adds your email address, you will receive a notification email with an activation link. If you haven't received any activation mail, please check your spam folder as well. The activation link will direct you to the first login page where you have to set up your password. A red notification message has appeared in IIAs. Sometimes if you exchange IIAs with an institution, with an EWP provider other than the dashboard, you may see a red error message. It is displayed when the partner institution has not shared their system's IIA ID. Therefore, it's not possible to continue the signing process since mandatory information is missing. You should contact your partner's institution colleagues and kindly ask them to respectively contact their providers in order to fix the problem. Besides the aforesaid typical issues and solutions, you always may contact the ESCI service desk either for your queries or for your issues. At this point, we would like to remind you that general issues regarding scheduled maintenance or system faults are mentioned in the main ESCI service desk page, from where you are informed for the estimated time of resolution. We kindly ask you to check that bar for announcements before submitting your request. Also, you are strongly recommended to look for information in the knowledge base at wiki.unifoundation.eu, where you can find responses to your queries before submitting your request. You should be able to find step-by-step tutorials, guides, and FAQs that could help you with your current issue. Apart from the frequently asked questions we discussed before, during the period of the operation of the new service desk, the following general issues were addressed and resolved by our development team. The first issue that was resolved related to missing cooperation conditions in IIAs. Another issue that was resolved related to the signing of IIAs. Some IROs had reported that although they were signing the IIAs, the status was remaining unsigned without an error message. One more issue that was resolved related to IIAs marked with status -1, causing problems to the signing process. Another recently resolved issue was related to a malfunction of the email notification for IIAs. In the upcoming presentation, more details about technical issues that were addressed by the developer team will be presented. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Michalis, for your presentation and also for the hard work that you and your colleagues do at the service desk. For people in the Q&A asking questions or mentioning that their ticket is not resolved yet, as Michalis mentioned, they get a lot of tickets and they resolve tickets every day, and some tickets might take a bit longer. As he mentioned, also because of the technical aspects, because as he mentioned, the service desk is the first line of response. but we have many other technical teams working in the background on maintaining the dashboard and on resolving issues. And today we have with us Kostas, who is the technical lead for the IT colleagues at the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. And he will provide some more information about, as Michalis mentioned, the maintaining of the dashboard and resolving the more hardcore technical issues, but also on some of the things to come and to respond to some of the requests that we've been getting about additional features. So Kostas, can you hear me?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yes, I can see that you're sharing your screen. All right, we can see your presentation now. Floor is yours, Kostas.
David, can you also see my face? I think you can't.
No, I cannot see your face. I can see a black screen, but I can hear your beautiful voice perfectly.
Okay. Hello all. It's nice to meet again with our users. I'm Kostas Karaoglanoglou. I'm the technical lead of the development team that is working on improving the EWP dashboard services. The outline for today's presentation is the role of the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki in this ecosystem. I will provide some insights on the work process, collaborating with you, the users, the service desk agents, and the development team to constantly push improvements in the production instances. I will give you an overview of the improvements we have already done in the past couple of months, and what the future holds for the EWP dashboard. So, as I've said, I'm the technical lead of the development team that is working in the EWP dashboard services. We are a part of the IT center of AUTH, and the university's technical role from the 1st January of 2022 onwards is providing corrective maintenance, site reliability engineering actions in the infrastructure, and developing widespread improvements in the WP dashboard services. Allow me to provide you some insights about the work process and how important your role as users of the EWP dashboard services is. Apart from proactively identifying problematic areas and areas to improve by ourselves as the development team, we have been making good use of the effective pipeline of communication that is now established in the ESCI service desk. You, the users, are reporting issues. The service desk agents proceed with either resolving them or escalating them to the development team. And of course, the development team acts upon them. And once a batch of improvements, fixes is ready for deployment, we are pushing it to the production instances. This basically means that we have an announcement that will pop up in the service desk's front page. I think Michalis showed this landing page of the ESCI service desk in his presentation also. An announcement will pop up there informing the EWP dashboard users about the scheduled downtime. These announcements are popping up frequently in the past couple of months. I know that it is irritating and disrupting for your work, but believe me, it happens for a good reason. Plus, we are always making sure to notify in advance for this. I mean, a couple of days before actually proceeding with deployments in the production instance, so that you, the users, know beforehand when these scheduled downtimes are to occur. So please check this page regularly. Now, moving on to improvements that are already deployed in the past couple of months in the EWP dashboard services. The first area of improvements, actually taking into consideration your reporting of issues in the service desk, was ensuring that the IIM, the Interinstitutional Agreement Manager implementation, is functional and operational. Also establishing a smooth exchange of IIAs via the EWP network. Michalis also did a great job in the previous presentation in communicating specifics about bug fixes and improvements that have been introduced in the past couple of months. Speaking of smooth exchanges via the EWP network, you have all started to experience recently when interacting with the application, clear indications and more intuitive messages on the front-end side, so that the users, you always know why you can or cannot move forward with an action, especially when it comes to exchanges via the EWP network. I have an image here showing an IIA marked for not having the partner's local IIA ID, so that you know that you will have to wait for the partner to inform about their local IIA ID before you proceed on any action on this. This was a source of confusion that we have identified in the ESCI service desk. And this is only one part of intuitive messages appearing here and there, widespread in the application. Another example of introducing more intuitive messages can be seen in the list in the listing EWP partners section, where you go and search for IIAs in the EWP, and you wish to download or update IIAs from the remote partners via the EWP network. We have also boosted this section with more intuitive messages and clear indications. We have enforced validation rules, taking the IIA data that is supposed to be exchanged from this functionality, proactively search for issues in the data that the partner wishes to share with the EWP dashboard. And this functionality is introduced as an appropriate safeguard when others do not exchange data complying with the EWP network rules. A major source of confusion evident in issues raised in the service desk also by the users, by you, was the matter of accessing the various sections of the EWP dashboard services. What have we done there? We've proceeded with a widespread refinement of access to the dashboard sections so that users now have access only to the relevant sections of data for which the EWP dashboard represents them in the EWP network. Hopefully we have cleared some confusion also on this matter already by this refinement of permissions access. Other improvements that happened in the last couple of months are ongoing efforts in performance optimization to the various components in the EWP dashboard services. The performance optimization is an ongoing effort so that we can effectively handle the ever-increasing load in the components of the services. I mean, it is evident that the demand for the applications and the various components is ever increasing, and we are doing our best to try to keep up with this increase. We are constantly doing performance tuning in the relevant databases. There were major performance optimizations that happened in the past couple of months, specifically to the learning agreements component. But we are constantly proceeding with improving the other databases also. We have also established monitoring tools so that we can proactively identify and quickly resolve performance bottlenecks. And we have a flexibility in the resources. And when I say resources, I mean the physical hardware resources that this infrastructure runs on, right? We have a flexibility in resources for components and services that are hosted in the Eeckhout premises to boost performance, to boost the performance in a specific component. Now, what should you expect in the future? I mean, we are working relentlessly on improving the EWP dashboard services, and we never lose sight of our ultimate goal, that considering the EWP dashboard's magnitude in the network, our ultimate goal is keeping the responsibility of being the reference implementation for our users primarily, and exchanging data in the EWP network. I hope I haven't gone into a technical depth that you would find hard to follow. That's all from my side, David. Thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you, Kostas. We also have a few questions that are related to you, or that you could maybe answer. Some questions are related to the functionalities of uploading and downloading data, specifically PDFs.
Okay.
Would you maybe be able to say something about that? For example, there's a question if you can upload IIAs to the dashboard from PDF or Word, or if it will be possible to download a fully signed IIA as a PDF, etc.
I will try to provide a wholesome answer. I mean, on the matter of importing data in the EWP dashboard. Importing for IIAs and Leys via CSV is already available. Now, to answer the question of importing via a PDF or a doc document, I mean, the technical feasibility of this is somewhat questionable. PDFs and doc documents submitted by the users are not structured enough so that you can extract everything you need in there, right, and actually store it in the EWP dashboard. I mean, the most technically sensible way for this to happen is with a CSV upload. These are files that have a structured format, and you can easily upload IIAs and the Leys in bulk, I may add, in the EWP dashboard. Now, for the exporting functionalities, LAs can be exported in a PDF format. Nominations can also be exported in a PDF format. A request of the users for exporting IIAs in PDF is well under our radar. There is work in progress happening as we speak about it. And we will be able to share a functionality for exporting IIAs in PDF around September, in a couple of months from now. I think, David, I've covered both the import and the export aspect of the question, right?
Yes, thank you. I also see some other people who want to answer questions, but maybe I can first direct. Yes, go ahead, Kostas.
No, I have also marked some questions to take live. I guess we are.
Yes, you can take those.
We are looking at the same list, right?
Yes. One question that you can maybe also answer, is there an option to eliminate an OLA to avoid duplicate versions?
Yes, this is also well under our radar, and there are some improvements coming to this also. This happens in the learning agreement.eu application, and the students have a tendency of firstly trying out things, not understanding that they are sending these to IROs, and then they start over and stuff like that. But we have something in mind to improve the situation there with duplicate OLAs also.
All right, thank you, Kostas. I think you have answered all the questions that were directed at you specifically. So I will take the floor now to ask another question. One of the questions that was asked is directed, I think, at our colleagues from the European Commission. The question is, we are using OLA for outgoing students, but many institutions have said that they are not using OLA and we need to send them the LA in PDF formats. So the question is, I think it's not clear for all institutions that OLA is mandatory for all students to be signed before the mobility. It's hard to work like this because it hurts the relations among institutions. So Alex or Nadia, I don't know how to respond to this question. Thank you.
Well, let me, first of all, thank you for the question. Let me indicate that yes, assigning OLAs are mandatory. Every mobility needs to be underpinned by a learning agreement. So no doubts regarding that. So let us send now a very strong and clear message that each mobility needs to be underpinned with a learning agreement. So now as well, thank you for this comment. I know that it's not, it might have been not clear, and from our side, we will try to communicate this better, and also communicate that there is a need to digitalize learning agreements by the end of the year, and all mobilities, also the ones, hopefully also the ones that are already occurring in the fall, need to be underlined, need to be underpinned with a digital learning agreement. I hope this answers your question. Thank you.
Yes, for me it does. Thank you. We have many more questions regarding the dashboard, and I think maybe Joao, there are some questions that you flagged that you want to answer. You want to do this now or at the end of the webinar?
Hi, David. Good morning to everyone. I could maybe come in a little bit later, if that's okay for you, because I think they go well with some of the topics we will explore. If you want to put me on the spot for something else, however, don't hesitate.
No, thank you. You can wait in the corridors until it's your turn. So some of you might be aware that recently we had a survey on everything ABP Plus related. Some of you might have participated in that survey, and we would like to thank you for that. And today we have Paul, who is the ABP Plus task lead for communication and outreach, working at the Ghent University, and he will with us go over some of those early findings and results from the survey. Paul, are you here?
Yes, I'm here, and I hope you can see and hear me as well. And indeed, it's my pleasure to kind of zoom out a little bit after the presentations from the colleagues that were addressing the real dashboard-related issues, and look into this rather large survey that we launched. And it was between March and April that we collected feedback. And we had about 700 respondents coming from 558 institutions. So it's about 11% of the ECCI holders. We also, in the results, analyzed that it seemed that the dashboard users were somewhat underrepresented. However, I think still some interesting conclusions can be made based on the feedback we received from this large pool of higher education institution representatives. And I will first zoom in a little bit on the current state of affairs on EWP implementation. And on the first slide that I share, or the first graph that I share, you can see what systems are used for the different processes related to mobility. And it's not a surprise, I guess, that Erasmus Dashboard is the most used system. Especially for interinstitutional agreements and learning agreements, and for outgoing and incoming mobilities, third-party providers systems are still a little bit more popular. But if we compare this kind of information with the connections in the registry today, we see somewhat of a different picture, where 77% of all higher education institutions connected for interinstitutional agreements are dashboard users, and the same for learning agreements. It's also a large majority that use dashboard. So here it's interesting to see that many of the exchanges will also probably be dashboard to dashboard. And if we look into the question on whether the respondents had to switch tools in order to join EWP, we see that about 40% of respondents answers that they still use the same tool, and that about 37%, I would say, if we take it all together, had to switch tool either because they didn't have a tool and they could start using dashboard. I assume many of the colleagues here present at the webinar are in this position, but also some of them changed from an in-house tool or a third-party tool to start using the dashboard. Of course, especially when you're using an in-house tool, given that you need to develop the whole functionality yourself, it makes sense to switch to the dashboard there, also maybe as an intermediate solution. But as Nikos pointed out in the beginning of the presentation, the dashboard is more addressing the needs of smaller and medium-sized institutions and not for big universities that tend to have an in-house tool to manage their mobilities. Now, if we look into the figures of what's the status of interinstitutional agreements and how far are the EWP exchanges, we see that negotiation oftentimes takes place outside the scope of EWP. I think this is also quite logical because at first it makes sense to address the cooperation conditions via email, for example, and only towards the end of this process, once you have an agreement on the overall cooperation conditions, then you can start negotiating via EWP and confirming the data points and the cooperation conditions that you addressed via email. We also still see quite a bit of institutions are still signing on PDF. But from the other hand, there's also a large percentage, if we take it together, 26 plus 28, that at least one or several interinstitutional agreements were signed via EWP. And I reckon that this is still from April. Those results are between March and April, and I reckon that currently those percentages would be even higher, because we clearly see an increase of interinstitutional agreements and learning agreements as well that get signed via EWP. This is the same kind of information, but targeted towards learning agreements. I think one of the questions that was the one that Alex addressed before is, of course, if your partner is not ready to exchange learning agreements in a digital manner, and you want to have, of course, the learning agreement before the mobility, we need to rely on, for the time being, on PDF. So I think there it's still a mixture of connections and not connections, but the good news is that many are connected via dashboard, so it should work for several of them, and that's also indicated in this 29%, which is a little bit higher than for interinstitutional agreements. Then about the European Student Identifier, you might be aware of it. At the last webinar, we talked extensively about it. It was one of the questions, and it seems that many colleagues are aware about the European Student Identifier, already implemented it or in the process of implementing. And if we compare it with the official stats from the My Academic ID point of view, we see that those numbers are already going into the right direction. That there's already 2,145 institutions that released ESI, and of course we need to go further and have the 100%. But as you see, there's maybe more of a hidden milestone, although it's also a very important one if you recall the session at the previous webinar. If we then look into the biggest obstacles, and please be aware that this survey was launched at the time the ESCI service desk was not yet available. So I hope that we address this biggest obstacle, that's the lack of support from EWP. Our partners are not ready to exchange data via EWP. Of course, this is something that you're indeed depending on your partner. And then there's also quite a bit of colleagues who answered that there's delays in functionality of EWP in their in-house or third-party system. And then there were also some free comments, and I think it's also relevant to share them because the large number of respondents, for example, when it comes to the functionalities that might not be 100% as the colleagues wish. And I think this question or this obstacle will be addressed later during the presentation from my colleague Joao. But it's good to also monitor them via surveys, via the service desk, and that's what we're constantly trying to do. If we then look into the mobility processes that are not yet supported via EWP, as you know, the digitization of the student mobility is an important priority for the Erasmus program. So if we then look into the current situation when it comes, for example, to traineeships, we encounter that 70% of traineeships are exchanged with non-ECI holders, which is of course an important element because there's companies, hospitals probably, NGOs and all of this kind of organizations that of course do not have IT tools like the ones that are present in universities. And so this informs how we should look into solutions to manage such processes. And you can also see that majority of the respondents does not have a tool to manage learning agreements or traineeship certificates, which of course is also related to this first observation that 70% are with non-ECI holders. So this is a very interesting figure also in order to plan a little bit ahead. If we then also take the key action 1171 into account, but also the international dimension of the current key action 1131. It's also interesting to see how institutions manage their interinstitutional agreements, and on the next slide, learning agreements with higher education institutions and partner countries. And there's a majority that does not have a tool to manage such agreements, but there's also quite a bit of institutions that indicate that they use the same tool for Erasmus interinstitutional agreements as for institutions with other universities. So it's also interesting to see. And then the same for learning agreements, where the figures are a little bit similar, but the percentages are higher when it comes to no tool. But then also about 26% says they use the same tool. Staff mobility agreements, of course, when we are talking about the digitization of administration of Erasmus program, it's not only about student mobility. Of course, they are the biggest percentage of exchanges, but also staff members are exchanged, both in the traineeships and as teacher. And if we then look into whether institutions have tools available for managing those staff mobility agreements, once again, a majority has no tool available. I think many of the colleagues here present in this dashboard session are in this situation because such functionality doesn't exist in dashboard. And then about 30% indicates they use the same tool as for learning agreements. And then 10%, if you take this 10% that is planning to implement one, we are at about 55% that does not have a tool at the moment. We also asked for some information about the priorities that the colleagues see when it comes to digitization of the further processes. And the first table I share, it's the score from 1 to 10 on how useful the community thinks it is to digitize such processes. And as you can see, the community indicates as the most useful process the automatic process for OLS. It's not completely in the scope of Erasmus paper, but it might become also related to mobility, the beneficiary module, sorry. Certificates of arrival and departure, and then also a few processes related to the international, what we call international student mobility, so the mobility outside the Erasmus program countries. And then we also asked to kind of give a ranking, like if you were in charge of the roadmap itself, what would be the order to further digitize mobilization processes? And here, of course, this is not a decision to be taken by the higher education institutions. It's the colleagues at the European Commission who have the final say about how the roadmap looks like. But I think the colleagues will find this also very interesting to see the priorities indicated by the higher education institutions. And you know that nominations are already part of this roadmap, transcript of records as well. The certificates are already in scope of what Erasmus paper is trying to achieve. And then also the automatic reporting in the beneficiary module. I think there was also a question in the Q&A about it, but it's very much on the radar. But of course, this is work in progress in order to also be able to more automatically report towards the beneficiary module using the Erasmus without paper framework. And then I think a very important comment made by 19% of the colleagues is, okay, we first need to focus on the current processes before we go into the future. And that's also what Joao will talk about in the next presentation. And if we look in the most important sources for finding information, it's clear that the national agency plays a very important role. It's also the case in terms of training. The majority of respondents indicated that this training by the national agencies is very useful. But we also have about 40% that refer to the Erasmus Goes Digital webinar, so happy to see that. And also quite a large group of respondents indicated that groups of colleagues using the same tool are a very useful platform in order to exchange about EWP progress and implementation. And once again, I need to refer to Joao's presentation because we also would like to offer a solution to the community when it comes to finding colleagues with the same tool and in order to kind of address issues and discuss implementation and solutions together. Finally, I would like to share your feedback from the previous webinar, where there was quite a bit of positive feedback in the Q&A, and about 28 questions were about interoperability. And I think I already referred to the next presentations and some of the previous slides. I think interoperability, it's the main topic that my colleague Joao will talk about in the next presentation.
All right, thank you, Paul. Maybe I have one question because you mentioned national agencies and the training, that it's something that people rely on heavily. There was a question of how we interact with the national agencies, specifically regarding training and rules. Is that something that's coming up or that we are working on?
Yes, thank you, David, or thank you, the person who asked this question, because it's indeed very important. And as part of the EWP Plus governance structure, There was a monthly meeting with digital officers together with the colleagues from the European Commission, where many issues are discussed, and as well everything that has to do with communication, training. We offer them to cooperate in organizing such events. So it's definitely something that the consortium are working very closely together with the digital offices and the national agencies and the European Commission in order to try to support the community to the largest possible extent.
All right, thank you. So that's very much in line with the needs of institutions regarding the role of national agencies. Thank you for your presentation, Paul. And as Paul mentioned, we have a final, well, I think maybe the most important segment maybe of this presentation, where I will give the word to Joao, who is, for those who do not know, the executive manager of the European University Foundation. And he will introduce what we call the Interoperability Reinforcement Plan, which was elaborated at the request of the European Commission to address some of the issues regarding interoperability. Joao, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me, David?
I hear you perfectly. I will turn off my camera so you can take the stage.
Thank you very much. Let me try to share my screen in the meantime. So no pressure for this point. It's clearly an easy one. Can you give me a
Yes, I can see it in presentation mode now perfectly. Thank you.
Excellent. So good morning to everyone, or good afternoon, depending on your time zone. I have the pleasure of introducing a topic that featured in many of our discussions. I think it featured prominently in our last webinars, and that as David said, we've been working on very hard at the request of the colleagues from the European Commission. I will give you a bird's eye view. We will have a more extended presentation in the afternoon webinar, because last time we've had these sessions, the colleagues, the network users raised this more so than the dashboard users, but I think it's relevant for you as well. In fact, I wanted to use the motto. I think one of the questions in the chat that we said we would answer live was a colleague, Attila, I think, that asked, when will the dashboard work properly? And this is kind of the answer. For everything to work well, we need to work together in concert. And so there's no game over until all the critical nodes are doing their thing. So let me explain briefly what I mean by this, what we call in short this action plan. So this is really about making an extra effort to make sure that this digitization agenda advances as planned. We are already a little bit outside of the plan, because some of you that have been following and working on this dossier will remember that originally it was last summer that we expected to have all the major nodes not just connected, but correctly being able to exchange interinstitutional agreements and learning agreements. So it's clear that when this is not the case, this has an impact on the processes. It's true that we're still in the transition process, but nonetheless, clearly there is something here that required for some action. I'm going to spare you the technicalities. Of course, that what I'm going to present to you is the joint work of technical teams, of policy teams, trying to comb very carefully through the feedback that we receive in the webinars and the service desk. We do have cases of questions put to us in the service desk that we do not have the tools, the capability to address, which is also very frustrating for us. And so what I'm going to present to you are the key actions that are foreseen to be taken over the next 6 months. Now, for technical reasons, you'll see that slides like, let me move forward a little bit. You see here start M1 and M2. I know this is not very intelligible, and I apologize for that. M1 stands for month 1, M2 stands for month 2. We use this terminology because we are in the last steps of getting the formal approval to move forward with this. But the plan is, what we're working towards is that this action plan comes into action already 2 weeks from now, in the beginning of July. So I apologize for the lack of intelligibility, but take this as a tip to translate, to auto-translate what I'm about to present to you. So there are essentially 3 vectors that make up this action plan. One is to move from what is a trust-based environment, which is the EWP network, into a rather more rules-based environment. Now, this is a change that is also a change of paradigm. It doesn't happen overnight, and I'll try to explain to you how we're going to go about it. The second point is that we noticed, and again, it's difficult, that oftentimes questions are not followed up. And I mean in general, whether it's the ESCI service desk, whether it's other service desks of other tools. And obviously this creates a compounding sense of frustration. So we will try to do something about it. It's never easy, but I think it's certainly worth trying. And the last factor has to do with how we're going to try to work closer still together with the third-party providers to overcome the issues that some of you, many of you, I believe, are experiencing. Obviously, these three vectors don't work independently from one another. They add to more than the sum of their parts. Their interdependencies are very rooted. So we divide them sometimes perhaps a little bit artificially so that it makes it easier for you to follow the structure of what we're working on. But don't feel like there is more to this than Lego, obviously. So on the first point, the short summary was already shared. So interoperability is a very big issue until we can overcome it. We have been looking into, as the colleagues explained, hundreds of tickets, a lot of feedback that comes to us through other means, whether it's conferences and workshops, whether it's contacts and feedback from the digital officers, study cases, and we encounter several cases where a given node says, okay, I've implemented something, but in fact, it's only a part of something that is implemented in some cases. I give a very classical example that has already been discussed publicly, which is I've implemented interinstitutional agreements, but maybe only the cooperation conditions and not yet the default interinstitutional agreement data. This is an easy example. There are more complicated ones that have been brought up in the chat, notably with regards to the support of multiple cooperation conditions. So this is the problem. We really need to have a clear level playing field, because this pitfalls then reflect on how things work or how they don't. So first action is we all know and love the templates that we work in the program that inform the data models, the functionality of the tools. But after many discussions, we felt that it would be important to define not just the templates, but actually to make it clear what the mandatory business requirements for interinstitutional agreements and learning agreements are. This is something that then can be used to feed into the assessment of whether a solution is ready and complete. And in fact, it's such an important document that this is going to be one of the first things that we will work on. If we can keep to the July schedule, we expect to have this documentation ready, or some of it maybe already also in July, other hopefully at the end of the next month. End of August, so that we can start the academic year with no more skeletons in the closet on this, no more misunderstandings. We've also noticed that you work with these things every day, but technical teams, they can use some material to interpret, to become acquainted with the business needs, and this should support it. A second action. This is essentially an answer to the question of how do we get quick wins? I mentioned before that changing paradigms in this kind of network with thousands of nodes doesn't happen overnight. So we've been trying really hard to understand, what's the quickest way from finding a problem to fixing it. And some of it has to do with service desk and the kind of follow-up, which I will come to in a minute. But what we've been looking into is that because the dashboard is of such magnitude, as a colleague mentioned, we are looking to use our own access into the network to literally hunt errors and to try to reverse engineer them, define what the problem is, identify the solutions, and work with the partners so that the solutions can be implemented as quickly as possible. Currently, our mandate to do this, we do it, of course, as colleagues with one another, but to have a clear mandate to do this will be very important. And this is to be, I think I speak at least on behalf of the EWP team. This is how we think that we can make a bigger impact in the shortest period in the shortest period of time. We're still looking for other ways to really turbocharge this process of debugging across all systems. But this is kind of the summary of this action, which is planned to run throughout the entirety of the action plan. So from next month to the end of the year, this would be one of our main priorities. But now comes the big guns. As you know, there have been technical testing that has been carried out since already last year. And it's very unfortunate that sometimes the results of the technical testing do not correspond to the reality of the production environment, which is what the systems where the end users are called. This creates a loophole which is in principle addressed by the testing protocols, but it also reflects the need to do much more stringent testing. This is what we call conformance testing. And of course, that priority is usually given to nodes, to hosts, if you will, that support multiple universities, such as the guys in a third-party provider. But this, of course, would also be very important for systems of in-house universities, and increasingly we strive to have a level playing field for both. So what this means is that we will start a process to thoroughly revise and expand the testing protocols in such a manner that we cannot have any more results that do not match the reality that users witness in their systems. This is an activity that will need to last more than 6 months. It's something that in the IT industry, there are clear standards for, so this is what I meant by industry compliant. It's an activity that will also benefit from having an impartial party being involved. And I hope it's okay if I mention that for this, we will resort to the know-how of the colleagues from IBM, which of course have many years of experience of operating in this field. This is part of the reason why we have synergies with also non-academic partners. And this is ultimately how do we make sure that all the nodes in the so-called production network where data is exchanged are indeed compliant. There is one more action that will be set out that in fact we already started working on, which is to try to log all the technical errors in the EWP network. Currently, we find out that there are errors because someone writes this in the service desk if they happen outside of the systems that we run and control. And we will try to upgrade this. There is actually already work that is being done on the framework, on the technical framework to allow this, but then the implementation will of course have to be done by each point in the network, and this will take a few more months. But this will allow us to gradually accumulate statistics that allow us to think of it as a health monitor. You know, if we detect that there is a peak in errors in a certain node, then we can trigger a communication with the colleagues, we can do some forensics, we can understand what's going on and be quicker to try to address the problem. So it can be extremely powerful. It can take a little bit of time until it goes into full functionality for everyone, because everyone needs to buy into this concept. Everyone needs to do a little bit of technical work to make it possible. And with this, I switch to the second priority, because I think I might already be running out of time. So I already mentioned that here the problem that is to be tackled is to make sure that we put an end to situations that were described in our last webinar in April, which is, I filed a ticket, they told me it was someone else's problem, nothing happened. And I'm saying this knowing full well that sometimes I hope that we don't reply to tickets in this manner in our service desk. I know that we don't, but this falling in between the cracks is really quite difficult. So what we intend to do is to actually widen the scope of the existing service desk, so that through it we can see all of the tickets that will be reported on interoperability issues. Practically speaking, if currently you use a third-party provider, you file your tickets with the entity that operates that system. So we don't see it. They might be escalated to us or they might not. So what we will try to do is to essentially put in place a tracking system so that we make sure that these issues are followed up. This will require some refactoring of the existing service desk to expand it to accommodate this. And we will start working on this also as soon as the green light comes through. And we expect that this will remain in operation at least through the length of the action plan, presumably maybe even longer, but that's very much to be confirmed. A second action in this topic has to do with something that users of the network in particular have asked rather loudly and rather understandably, I might add, in the last webinar, which is to make it easier for you to come together, to share what problems you're finding, to also share solutions that you might have, exchange information, not to be isolated at this level. We know that some providers already have user groups. The dashboard does not, and we will be circulating some updates on this very quickly indeed. It's only a matter of days until we'll come back to the dashboard users with more details, and to all the users of EWP with this announcement already starting this afternoon. It's going to be a forum for you to meet. It's not necessarily a question and answer. It's definitely not a replacement for the service desk or for the GitHub when more technical questions are concerned. But I think it will also be very important to us to keep our fingers on the pulse of what the conversation is, what the problems are. And we will use this as a base to also organize, get-togethers. At least we'll try to do 2 times a year. And this will become part of the governance structure of EWP. So end users, such as, in technical terms, we usually call IROs, International Relations Officers, BPOs, business process owners, but they're interchangeable. So there will be a business process owner forum as part of this governance structure, and the user groups are going to be a cornerstone of it. They will be complemented by a standing group, where, for example, we will also have representatives from expert groups at the national level and others that have been appointed to do a more continuous follow-up, to also help us parse the feedback that comes from the user groups, help us prioritize and do analysis that it's very difficult to do when we have several hundreds of colleagues in the room. So we will work in concert. We will share information from one side of this BPO forum to the other, to make sure that this remains as user-centered as possible, and that you can drive the agenda of what actions are required. So this is a big announcement. We will follow up with you as quickly as we can. I think even before the approval of the action plan, because we know that time is of essence. Action number 3. This is a very easy one. I'm going to go very quickly on it before the band starts playing, even if it's not quite the Oscars ceremony. So one of the things we noted is that this format of webinars is a little bit unilateral. We come, we present, we share updates, we try to answer your questions, obviously. But the suggestion was made, and credit where credit is due, I think it was by also the DGAC colleagues, to say, why don't we get together and we just ask questions? We forego the presentations, we use it to complement these webinars. And this is what we call the town hall meetings, and thought that's a very smart idea. We should do exactly that. And so we hope to have the first one already in July, month 1, as I mentioned, and the second one shortly after in autumn, in a date to be announced. Presumably the first one would focus on a more extended version of what I'm presenting here today, the action plan, discussing with you, also asking you that this goes both ways. It's important for us to be able to understand how you see certain problems. I also take the opportunity to thank colleagues in the Q&As that were explaining some use cases and whether we can support them or not, because it's a conversation. So expect this to be coming to your browser shortly. Maybe we should do some live town halls as well, as much as circumstances allow. We'll start online because, of course, that is probably the most inclusive way. But let's try to really strengthen the communication, the sharing of ideas, and also of problems, so that hopefully, as quickly as possible, you never have to feel that you don't have enough information. And a fourth action. I said I was going to be quicker. I have to get better at this. So comes September, date to be confirmed, but that's really the target we are aiming at. We will also aim to publish an assessment report of what is the state of play in terms of electronic data exchange, particularly the question of interoperability, which is, of course, the one that it's difficult for any given person to grasp from a single standpoint. So what we will try to do in this report is essentially to be as transparent as we can. Everything we know, whether it's information that comes to us through analysis of statistics, whether it's information that comes to us through you, through the meetings and the town halls and the webinars, whether it comes through the analysis of the tickets in the service desk, which our colleagues already talked a little bit about, and which is a really important piece of this puzzle. We will try to collate that to provide an eye-level overview of where we are, what are the most prevailing obstacles that are known to us, what is the way forward, so that also this can inform our conversations as a community. And with this, I switched to what I call the last factor, the last track. And here it's very important to make a very clear statement, which is it's not easy when so many systems are running in parallel. Sometimes they compete with one another, and yet it's absolutely essential that we work in concert, because we only really overcome the question that Attila asked: when will things work properly? When they work properly across as many nodes as possible. So it's the classic definition of a win-win. It's acknowledging that we have even a selfish interest to work harder with the third-party providers to really bring up everyone in terms of their EWP implementation. And so what we have in mind in this respect, obviously some of the points I've already presented already presuppose that we will agree to share things like statistics, error logs, and others. The first thing we're going to do, because we think this goes a long way, together with this debugging that I've mentioned in the beginning, we're really hoping for some quick wins here as well. It's to sit down with the technical teams of the various providers, something we don't really have the luxury of doing since a long time, and just go through the code, go through the implementations, try to, if possible, face-to-face, if necessary, online, try to really review the implementations and find hands-on what is not working. It's something that we aim to do still this summer, if possible at all. We will, I'm not going to announce dates because we will look for dates that suit most colleagues to maximize participation. And then, of course, we'll evaluate whether this was a productive effort or not. Maybe it will be the beginning of something more regular, but we need to start somewhere. Let's start in the interinstitutional agreements and the learning agreements, which is what I think all of you are also currently focused on. Action number 2. It's very simple. It's in the same way that we invite all of you to come to the service desk when questions arise. We will open this up to the third-party providers, which was not a primary target group, to be honest, for this effort, because we have other fora, other channels where to exchange technical information. But this step, however small, is meant to make sure that if there are technical questions, they are put forward. A service desk, as you know, it's a one-to-one discussion, so it's not a public thing. Usually there is merit to make technical discussions public because it creates a record, it allows us to travel back in time, reconstruct certain steps and decisions we've made. But this is really making sure that that will not be a constraint for anyone to be in position to come forward and say, I have a question, can you help me? What can I do about this? And of course, we will do our utmost to share the expertise that we have. So as with many of the other actions, something that will happen through the next 6 months, it's really the focus of the action plan. Maybe to be continued, we will see, but really try to turbocharge this process. Sorry. And the last point, which is something that I think can also have a transformative impact. If we are serious about the importance that third-party providers play in this ecosystem, and it's immense, as you know, I think allocating more resources to this will bring us to also establish a relationship manager role, someone that literally whose job is to strengthen cooperation, to make sure that we are on the same boat, working towards common goals, enforcing compliance, and obviously it should be brilliant to be able to extend this to in-house systems. Still some details to be worked out, but something that we're very excited about. We also, again, credit where credit is due. Inspiration for this action comes from our colleagues at the GIAC that I believe have had good experiences with this kind of approach, and we will try to learn from best practices and make it happen. This action, we will also start working on this as soon as possible. There is a delayed start because you all know that recruiting usually is something that doesn't happen overnight, particularly not when you want to get the very best people for the job. So this is something that the nature of the job is such that doesn't make sense. We will focus it in the first 6 months, but it's obviously that we need to commit to a slightly longer time frame because relationships, trust is built and requires time to be enhanced and consolidated. So in a nutshell, this is what I wanted to share with you. I apologize to my colleagues if I overstepped in terms of the time available. If there are still some questions, I'll be happy to try to share more on the topic. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Joao, for your presentation. I think it was necessary, so no problem with the time. I think we're over a few minutes, but I would like to take present you with a few more questions. To everyone who still has open questions, if they're about technical issues, like we mentioned today, you can always reach out to the service desk, and they will try to respond to your question in due time. I have a few questions I see regarding interoperability, like you mentioned, where people ask if an institution is not connected to EWP or to the dashboard, how can we proceed with learning agreements? I think that there is an answer for that.
Yes, I can also answer orally. I have a bit of connection issues, so that's why I just replied in the chat for everyone. I hope you can hear me. Now I see David blocked, but again, maybe it's on my side.
I can
okay,
hear you
so
perfectly.
I wrote it. Okay. Again, I'm very sorry for this connection problems. I hope you can still hear me and see me. So the idea is as following. Of course, if your partners are not ready to digitalize and you're still in the process, but you are ready to digitalize, however, your partner is not ready to digitalize PDF version, or you should exchange the way you were used before. So mobilities need to be underpinned. There needs to be a paper learning agreement or a physical learning agreement, and the same for the IAAs. However, in the moment that you're ready, you should move. Yes, the idea is that there will not be penalty, because if you're ready but your partner is not ready, you shouldn't be penalized for that. Actually, monitoring and see what is the situation in the institution. This will be indicated. I hope you could hear this is clear.
Well, you dropped off for a few moments, but I think the message was clear. And we will also keep answering a few more questions in the chat. Are there any more specific?
I apologize for this. I will continue and answer or elaborate on that also in the chat if needed. And I hope that the message is passed.
Regarding the remaining questions, like I mentioned, the presentations will be made available after the webinar. The link was shared in the chat, so you can go there. It's on the Competence Center, I think. I'm just looking over the questions one more time to see if we have some time for something additionally. All right, I see that there are some questions regarding that the sound wasn't very clear, but like you said, Alex will respond to a few more questions in chat. I think we can thank all the participants for their presentation today, and I think if you are any additional more questions, or like Joao mentioned, if you are interested in learning more about the action plan, There will be a session this afternoon for users, directed at users with a third-party provider system or an in-house system. And there we will go over the action plan more in depth. And as Joao mentioned, there are some more meetings coming up in the next months, like for example, the town hall meetings where we will be focusing more on the Q&A and your questions and addressing your questions and the presentations. But I hope that the message from today is clear, that we have been working on the dashboard continuously in the behind the scenes, updating the dashboard, fixing issues, maintaining the dashboard. And we have taken notice of many of the comments and the things that aren't going as well. And we want to address it with the action plan. So hopefully those will be addressed in the coming days. I want to thank everyone for their presence today and their availability. And as mentioned, the recordings will also be made available on the European Student Card Initiative YouTube channel, where the full recording will be available. So thanks again, and we hope to hear or see you soon. Have a good day, everyone.